Welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Another exciting show and definitely another exciting guest. Let me tell you where we're going with today's show. And I know Brian's probably tripping because he's like, what did I sign up for today? Well, let me tell you where we're going with this and how things work in my world. When you start to look for something, it'll pop up. Now, for those who know, we are producing a new show called Black Shield, which is the story of 3 law enforcement individuals in their career path and what they dealt with for years of experience in law enforcement. And I remember telling them before we get ready to do season 2, we need to get a lawyer. We need a lawyer to come on this show and bring some of that expertise. And lo and behold, as soon as I go to social media, guess whose name popped up? Brian. I'll tell you a little bit about Brian. I've been watching his social media pages. And what I like about it is he's direct, he's to the point, and he makes you engage. Because the same questions that I was thinking in my head, he was already putting it out there for social media. But let me also keep going with this. Lawyers have to get paid. So that means he's doing us as outsiders a free service. You don't get that from lawyers. And let me use this word again, free service, or should you say consultation fees. He's giving this to you. I think that's important. And I thought it was important to have him come on the show to explain a little bit of why he's doing it, a little bit about his career, and the importance of how you yourself need to understand the law, especially with things changing the way they are. You see it all over social media. Somebody talking about, I have the right to not give you my ID. Police brutality. We hearing it all over. So without further ado, let's welcome to the show. I'll make sure I get his last name. Brian J. Zeiger, attorney at law, defense from Philadelphia. Zeiger. I was close. From Philadelphia. What's going on, big guy?
You got it.
So before we get started, Brian,
Philadelphia, home of the Super Bowl champion.
Look, don't go there. Don't go there with me. I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan, so I'm not rooting for anything that says Philly at this particular.
Oh, you seem like such a nice guy. Oh,
I mean, you may not have me on retainer after this show. So, Brian, tell the viewers a little bit about who you are before we get started.
My name's Brian Zeiger. I'm originally from Philadelphia. I've been a lawyer for 25 years. I've handled thousands of cases. I believe over 150 jury trials as the main lawyer. I work at a small boutique-style personal injury firm in Philadelphia. I've never done a personal injury case in my life. I do basically all civil rights cases and some few criminal cases for some families of people I know. I used to do a lot of criminal, but now I do a lot less and a lot more civil rights. And that's sort of the answer to your question.
Were you always fascinated by law growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I graduated from college right when I was about 21, and I went right to law school and got a master's degree at night. Sort of at the same time, and I graduated law school just after my 24th birthday. So it's really sort of went right into this. I had a lot of jobs as a kid, sort of working in retail and things like that. But then once I sort of graduated college and went to law school, I've had all legal jobs since then. So it's really the only sort of occupation I've ever had in my life.
Why the legal field? I mean, were family members in your family lawyers as well? But why gravitate to law? There was no other choice that you was looking towards but law?
Yeah, no, there was really no other choice. At the beginning, I thought I was going to do tax law, and I dipped my toe in that for a little bit, and I realized quickly it wasn't for me. And I realized that being in court and doing jury trials and cases of that nature was far more well suited for my personality. And since that time, I've used those skills to try as many cases as I can. And again, I did a lot of criminal cases when I was younger. And so sort of my clients and the people in the community I work with in criminal cases is sort of very similar to the people in the types of civil rights cases that I handle. And so it was sort of an easy transition for me over the last 25 years to sort of do a lot more civil rights cases and try to help people in the community.
Let me ask a question, because you mentioned criminal law. How difficult is it to be a criminal lawyer? Because you have to know point blank. The clients have to be truthful with you. So I'm going to just throw it out there. If I'm being truthful with you and I committed a case to you, or my case to you, and I did it, how do you really represent me knowing that I'm guilty of the charge that I'm about to do? So what's your best interest for me? Is it to plea bargain me down, or how would that work as being a specialist in this?
So there's very few clients in criminal that tell you that they did everything they're charged with. Mm-hmm. Very few. It's a very small percentage. I would say less than 10%.
Wow.
And for those people, you try to get them the best deal that you can possibly get them, to try to minimize the amount of time they're going to spend in jail, minimize the charges they're going to get, and do your best to sort of negotiate for them. The vast majority of clients, say, well, I might have done this, but I'm charged with this. And so that's not really true. It isn't really exactly what happened. And I find that to be compelling. And so for those people, oftentimes we're doing a lot of motions. We're fighting the case. We're sort of doing what we can, because you have to remember that it's always on the prosecutor to prove the case. We don't prove innocence, right? We don't shoot the ball. It's like a half-court basketball game. And they have to prove the person guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So what that means is we're playing defense the whole time. We're moving our feet. We've got our arms in the air. We're jumping. We're blocking shots, stealing the ball, trying to, knock it out of bounds. They have to shoot it and get the shot off, and it's got to go in. And the level of difficulty is reasonable doubt, which to me is about 91%. So, a lot of guys, don't really tell me much about their case at all. And they just say to me they want to go fight their case, and so I go fight for them because it's what they tell me to do. I know my role,
right,
if you will, in criminal. In civil rights, it's much different because we have the burden of proof, so I have to prove the case. But there, it's civil, so it's called a preponderance, the standard. So the difficult level of the shot is more like 51%.
How much of the civil
lighter burden, but now I have to prove it.
How much of a case is more? How much of a case that you dealt with your years of being a legal professional, how much of it really starts out with violation of somebody's civil rights?
Well, in the civil rights case in federal court, which is a little different than state court, but in federal court, there has to be a constitutional violation in order for you to be able to proceed. If there's no constitutional violation, then you don't have a case. So you have to start there. So I wouldn't sign up a case and agree to take a civil rights case unless I believed, we're going to federal court and there's a constitutional violation here. So at the very beginning, at the precipice of life and, me taking these cases and helping folks, I'm not going to be involved in your life unless I think there's a constitutional violation before we start. So that issue doesn't really come up.
You mentioned
something, or else I wouldn't be involved.
Right.
I would say no, thank you.
You mentioned something on your social media page that I thought was really crazy. You mentioned like a state, Alabama. You said that the justice system sucks. Like,
right?
How does it? Elaborate on that a little bit, because every state has different laws and different ways of conducting things, but you clearly signaled out Alabama. What made Alabama interesting topic for you on your social media page?
So each state can have their own laws, but the federal law is the floor. And by the floor, I mean, if you picture in your mind, if my hand is the floor, it means anytime a state gives someone rights that are below the floor, that's not okay.
Wow.
So you can go to the federal court system and try to say the state is giving me rights below that. Now, a state can give someone more rights, and that is great for my clients, but they can never give anyone less rights than the minimum. Okay. So basically there was a story going around that there was a certain prison system in Alabama where the conditions of confinement were not up to sort of the federal minimum. And so that these prisons had been or prison had been investigated and turned over, and new staff and fixing it up and sort of things like that. And it sparked my interest because there is a minimum amount of care that the government is required to give to inmates. And we're not talking high here. I mean, we get all these comments on social media when I talk about conditions of confinement for inmates, where a lot of people think, oh, who cares? I'm talking about like the basic minimums, like
Right.
like nothing where any one of us would ever want to live.
Right.
They weren't even up to that. So
Wow.
that's what sparked my interest. There was a federal investigation and all this information.
Let me ask a question. With so much stuff going on in the world right now, you know, we're dealing with immigration law, we're dealing with deportation. Our president is all over the map with different things. I'm trying every day to wrap my head around exactly what's going on in America. We keep hearing "Make America Great," but I ask myself all the time, was America ever really great? Because it was built on the backs of immigrants from all over this country. So now we see a high rate of I would say to some degree violation of rights, but where does the rights actually take place if you're not born here in America? You know, where's the fine line between justice, injustice, and civil right as far as you're concerned?
Well, it's not one group. So in regard to immigration, and I think that's the problem, is that in the media we see everyone is sort of grouped together, right? So
Right.
you have someone who is in the United States illegally, who has been convicted of a felony. That person is totally different than someone who, you know, was born here but doesn't have paperwork,
Right.
who's done nothing wrong, or someone who's here on a green card who's done nothing wrong and never been convicted of any crimes and has a job and a social security number and pays taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And these people are all in different groups.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes in the media, we're looking at all of them as one, right? I mean, obviously, if there is someone who is here unlawfully, who entered the United States illegally, like they weren't born here with no papers, like they somehow evaded our borders and came in illegally, and they committed a felony like a sex crime or a murder or a shooting, and now they're in custody and the government wants to deport them. And the argument from the Trump administration is that the due process rights given to these individual people is too great, and that there should be a speedier way for our government to deport these people back to wherever they need to go. I think that's a totally different issue than saying, you know, there's someone who was born here, they don't have the right paperwork because their parents were scared to get them the right paperwork, and they have a gainful employment, they pay taxes, they contribute to our community,
Right.
they're good human beings and good people. I mean, that's just not the same issue.
Right.
And I think these things are conflated together, and I think it's very difficult for, you know, the media to deal with that, and I don't think that is really there. So I don't know if that answers your question.
How would
I think there's probably like 5 or 6 or 7 different categories of this, and it's not one.
How would you address such a situation right now from a legal aspect? Because I'm not a lawyer, but I would think if you're here illegally and you commit a crime, you also have the options. Would you be prosecuted here? Because you're a criminal lawyer too. Would you be prosecuted here, or would you waive the right to what's it called? I know they get deported, but they never get tried for a crime that they do here. So, I mean, this is like crazy. But my question to you is, being a legal professional, both criminal, civil, and dealing with these issues every day, what do you think needs to happen so everybody can get along? At least there's a starting point.
Right. Well, so your first question is, I mean, most jurisdictions that I'm familiar with, you know, if someone commits a crime, some prosecuting body is going to prosecute them whether they're here illegally or not.
Right.
And a lot of times they want the person to serve the time that they owe for the crime they committed here in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, they have what's called an ICE detainer, and then they get transported to ICE custody, and then there's proceedings to deport them. And so I mean, that happens all the time. That, someone then, when they're in ICE custody, I believe they can then say, and I don't do immigration cases, but I believe someone can then sort of waive whatever's going on in the ICE issue and just go right back to their country. They can not fight deportation. They can just go right back. Or they can fight deportation and say they want to stay here. And that's when things come up like asylum and things of that nature. Like they're not going to be safe, or they're going to be prosecuted or persecuted when they go back to their home country. So, but that's more of an immigration topic.
Right.
As far as people getting along in our community and how we deal with all this together, I mean, I think that's the much larger question for our community. That is a really big issue that we have. I mean, in Washington, there was a time when there were many bipartisan actions that went through Congress where we don't really see a lot of that at all anymore. So
do you think we need to see that happening again?
I do, but perhaps that's the way I think our Constitution works, is when we get along, the government can move forward. Right? We have to come to agreements and compromise, and we pass things through, and we have progress in our community. But when both sides are so diametrically opposed, it slows down the process and becomes so much more difficult for our legislature to make change.
How important is it for us civilians to know the law when it comes to? I noticed you had a lot of stuff on your social media about police and law enforcement and getting pulled over. How important is it for us to know the law versus interacting with the police? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm a little torn on my view on this one, right? So I think that most of the time you're not entitled to Miranda rights. You're hardly ever entitled to Miranda rights. We get phone calls all the time. They didn't read me my rights. Can I sue them? Or can I beat my criminal case? And the answer is almost always no.
Right.
It's not really relevant. You're only allowed to get rights if you're in custodial interrogation. You have to have both. Custodial interrogation. So if you're in custody and they don't ask you any questions and you blurt it out, that's not right. And if you're not in custody and they're just talking to you, that you don't get rights for that. But you do have a right to remain silent. You can remain silent even if they don't read you your rights. You can always say, I know my rights. I'm not going to answer any questions. I'm going to exercise my right to silence, right? And that I think is important for people to know, because a lot of times statements of my clients is what really screws us in a case. But on the other hand, I mean, somewhere, in the high 90s, not high 90% of police are wonderful human beings.
Right.
They would do anything for you. Right. They would protect you under any circumstance. They're far braver people than I would ever be.
Right.
Right. They would do anything for you. I mean, they would help you cross the street. They would get your cat from the tree. They would pull you out of a burning building. Right. They're far more heroic people than me, physically. So, the police that I'm dealing with in my cases are like that sort of 2 to 5% of police.
Right.
So I always say in my social media posts, know your rights. Don't make any statements, but if the police officer asks you for your driver's license, give it to him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe in a pedestrian stop, in a certain neighborhood where the stop is pretextual, the officer should be ashamed of himself for stopping you.
Right.
But if you give them your ID, they're going to check it and leave you alone. They're going to send you. I mean, at some point, if you're courteous to the police and the police is courteous to you, you're going to be cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So it's like I get the whole ID thing, and people are like, but it's an intrusion into my person and you're seizing my identity. I agree with all that. I get it. But like, if there's a car stop and they stop you for speeding, I mean, if you're going 80 in a 55 and they stop you, it's like, put your hands on the steering wheel. Don't make any statements. Be nice to the officer. Show the officer courtesy. If they ask you for your driver's license, tell them where it is in the car and say, can I get it? And give it to them. Why do we have to make everything this? I mean, most police officers are very decent, good people.
Well, it's a speeding ticket. So what does that mean? You're going to get a speeding ticket.
Yeah, well, you were speeding.
Yeah.
I mean, my grandfather always told me the way not to get burned is don't play with fire.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's how you don't get burnt. Right. So it's like if you're going 80 in a 55 and you get pulled over for speeding, you're going to get the ticket. You can hire someone to get the points off or fight for you. But I mean, The interaction with the cop, I mean, what did the cop do wrong? You were going 80 and a 55. Why are we against the police for that? I don't it doesn't make any sense to me.
Speaking of that, Brian, what's the most craziest case you've ever had, you know, that you've dealt with in your years of being a lawyer, that you look at your client and you go, really? You want to go to court with this? And you know it was stupid to begin with, but you had to take the case because they paid you.
Well, in a criminal context, I mean, I've had murder cases where the person won't talk to me.
Wow.
Like, and you would think, based on what your wife paid me, you'd talk to me.
Right.
But they have this whole persona of, I don't know anything about this case.
Wow.
And then you read the discovery and you're like, I get your position, because it's a circumstantial case, meaning, like, you know, the person who was killed is dead, so they can't identify the person.
Right.
So they don't have anyone else to identify them. And by circumstantial, I mean, you go to bed at night, you look out the window, it's dry outside, and in the morning when you wake up, you look outside the window and there's snow and footprints in the snow. You didn't see it snow and you didn't see anyone walk by your property, but
right,
the evidence outside that window is pretty certain that it snowed and someone walked past your property, right? So
yeah.
It's all circumstantial, right? There's no DNA or video evidence. There's no ID. But based on the circumstances, it seems like, you know, you might have been involved in this case. Can you tell me what's going on? And the person's like, I don't know any of these people. I don't know anything about this case.
Right.
And I find that to be like very, very like a struggle. Also in the civil rights context, there's some prison cases I've had that are just, they would just blow your minds. Like someone, you know, is in the mental health ward and they complain that they have like stomach pains, and they're not a drug seeker. They don't have any history of heroin abuse or,
right.
You know, they're not opioid abuse. They're not that kind of client. They're in for other reasons. They're a mental health patient, clearly, and they complain of stomach pains, and the doctors are actually writing on the chart that they're faking. What? And then the person like dies because their stomach exploded because they had like an ulcer that like blew up, right? Or you're in the prison system and there's an excessive force case where, you know, there's actual video of like the correction officers like jumping off desks or tables, or there's you know, videos of the officers dragging the person off the camera to where they think they're not on the camera, but the prison installed secret cameras that the guard doesn't know about, where you actually see the guards completely tuning up the guy and beating him and stomping on him, like crazy things in like prison guard situations where they're really like warlords. Like, it's just insane.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. So if something like that does happen, how does the I guess the person's family has to reach out to you and say, look, my family member just got beat up in the prison system. It seems like that. Right. What usually takes place if you take a case like that? Do you ask for the tapes? And what if they say we don't have any tapes?
Well, right. I mean, so they have to, in civil, it's different than criminal. In civil, they basically have to give you everything. And in federal court, you don't even really have to ask for it. There's a mechanism at the beginning of the case in federal where they have to just give you whatever they have in civil rights cases. So we learn pretty quickly whether there's a tape or not. But in a prison case, there has to be, you asked me before about a constitutional violation.
Right.
There has to be a state actor involved in the constitutional violation. We post on this all the time on social media. We get a ton of questions about it. So if there's other guys at the prison that come in your cell and beat you up, that may not be a case. You have to show that a state actor did something wrong, like they didn't give you enough protection, you were in the wrong custody level, a guard initiated the fight, you know, or a guard was the one that beat you. So you have to show somehow that some government agent, someone did something wrong, who works for the government. It can't just be other dudes that just decided to beat you. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Those cases can be very difficult.
That's crazy. Let me ask you a question. I had a friend, because you had something on your social media page about canines. Uh-huh. And I remember, I won't give his name out, but I have a friend whose son was attacked by a canine unit dog as he was proceeding to direct the officers to a domestic fight, but the police could not get into the unit because there was a big housing division and they didn't know where to go, but the kid knew. So he's communicating with the one officer, telling the officer, follow me. He's running, but the officer doesn't communicate with the other officers. They see a black male running, not knowing that he's telling the other cops how to get there. They let the dog out. The dog tears the boy completely up. Completely up.
So there's two separate issues there for me. Okay. First of all, if someone called us with one of those cases, and we've had those, when someone calls us with one of those cases, when you say the dog completely teared him up, I want to know exactly how torn up he is.
He's tore up.
I want to see the medical records myself with my own eyes.
Right.
I want to have expert doctors that I use tell me about the injuries from the dog. I want to know what body part it was. I want to know if he needs plastic surgery. I want to know all of those things. I want to know if he plans to get it, his course of treatment. You know, if it's in the face, is it near the eye? You know, is there a vision issue? Like, what's going on? Or is it like he's got 2 puncture wounds in his thigh? Right? I want to know. I want to know exactly what that injury is. And unless the injury is what I would call serious bodily injury, like some kind of deformation to his body or some kind of fracture or something that requires a surgery, I'm probably not taking that case, because for that type of case, I want to see a big injury. And I know that might sound bad, and there might be other civil rights lawyers out there that totally disagree with me, and that's okay. But for me, in a case like that, there's got to be a major league damage for me to get involved. Number two, in federal court, you know, they may have qualified immunity depending on what's going on, which is, for me, qualified immunity is terrible, and we should get rid of it. But qualified immunity, you know, really could shield the officer there, depending on the circumstances. And if the officer in good faith really thought that that young man was a suspect that was trying to escape the police and really didn't hear the other officer, then a judge in federal court can grant that officer qualified immunity who's in charge of the dog. And then there'll be no case at all. It'll be thrown out. Now, in state court in Pennsylvania, I think depending on what's going on there, you could bring that in just a normal state court action for sort of assault and battery against the officer. And I don't think they'd have immunity, and I think you could proceed. But the problem is some state court venues aren't that great in Pennsylvania. So, and the law is way better in federal court than state court for some of those claims. So I'd really have to, again, read the police report and see what's going on. But again, if there was serious injury, I would take it no matter what and fight that law and do the best I could for my client. But because of all these other issues involved in that type of case and the description of the facts you gave, unless the person had that serious bodily injury, I probably wouldn't take it.
Let's go back a minute. And you said something, and we talked about this even on Black Shield, the police immunity to certain things. Right. Give me your viewpoint on that, because I don't even know how I can even think about it, because I have family members that are in law enforcement. I respect the law. I fear the gun, but I respect the law. You know, it is what it is. But what's your take on it from a legal standpoint? What's your take on that without being a lawyer, as it could affect us?
So, as not a lawyer, as the way it could affect us.
Right.
Let's go there first. I have two answers. That's my first answer.
Okay.
I think that those 95 to 97% of cops that I said that are heroic, that would do anything for you, they don't need qualified immunity.
Right.
Right. Most of these qualified immunity questions that we get, if there was no qualified immunity, I think a jury would rule for the officer.
Right.
Right. Like we get questions all the time about qualified immunity, or a police officer will comment on one of the social media posts. A police officer commented the other day about a social media post where someone OD'd in their custody while they were like driving them somewhere or holding them in the holding facility. And then the family sued him for like not getting the guy the right medical treatment, you know, when he was coming down off whatever substance he was on. I don't think a jury's going to rule for him.
Right.
Going to rule against him. He doesn't need qualified immunity. What jury's going to rule against him? He's a police officer. He's doing his job. He's taking the guy in, and the guy ODs. He didn't give him drugs. The guy didn't ask for help. right? So, I mean, what's the officer supposed to do? What jury's going to rule against that police officer? Now, in that case, apparently, that officer was granted qualified immunity, and his case was dismissed. But my point is, he didn't need qualified immunity. He's a good human being. He's trying to help this guy. He's taking him into custody because he did something that he believed in good faith violated the law. And so why are we against that police officer? I think most jurors and most jury trials I have would rule for the officer. They're not going to give that family of the decedent money for that. Now, number two, legally, I think it's a court-created doctrine. And what that means is that it is something that judges created. It means Congress did not pass a law about qualified immunity to create qualified immunity, right? It means that it's something judges thought up and have deemed qualified immunity. And if you're a big student of the law, you would know that when Roe v. Wade was overturned by the Dobbs decision,
right,
that in Dobbs, the holding of Dobbs is that Roe v. Wade was a court-created doctrine. And so therefore, they're overruling Roe v. Wade and leaving it to the states to make that determination. And there was a case, the name escapes me, in Mississippi that is in the circuit court right now, where a judge ruled in her decision at the district court level that she believed qualified immunity is now unconstitutional under Dobbs, because the abortion case said that a court-created doctrine is unconstitutional, so therefore qualified immunity should be unconstitutional. So she doesn't, any of these police officers deserve qualified immunity. So to me, as a matter of law, qualified immunity seems defective and something that I hope at some point the courts examine and decide to abolish.
Wow. Let me ask another question. I'm one thing we do on this show is we bring informative education information to people. So I'm going to ask things that I've heard from people. I'm going to shoot it to you. I have a friend that was illegally detained, accused of theft in a local store. The security guard identified himself as a police officer, not a security guard, used the word in, and he also used the word racial profiled. He racial profiled the individual and illegally detained him, went and took the guy's driver's license, told him he was banned from the store. The manager tried to, from what I understand, tried to de-escalate the situation, but the so-called security officer was standing next to my friend, who, as he paid for the item, so he knew there was nothing stolen. Upon that, he goes in, gives him the receipts and everything's cool. The guy still continues to mess with my friend, follows him out to the car. My friend says, please do not take down my license plate because I'm in fear of my life now. Not only do you have your hand on your gun, you're identifying yourself as a cop, but now you are taking down my driver's license. So now you have access to me.
Right. Okay. So first of all, the person's not a police officer.
Right. He's a security guard.
So there's no state action. So it's not a civil rights case. As far as 42 U.S.C. 1983, right? Mm-hmm. There's no state actor.
Right.
So you could sue the store and sue the guy, but that's like suing a nightclub.
Why you say that?
like, you know, if you have a bouncer that hurts someone in a nightclub, they're not a cop.
Right.
So that's not a civil rights violation. Like the bouncer threw you out of the club, right or wrong, and then you broke your leg. So you sue them for it. So that's the same thing, right? You're in a store and it's a private store. It's not a government store and it's not a police officer. There's no state action. You can sue them for whatever you want to sue them for. But the problem with the scenario is that your friend's not hurt at all. So most personal injury lawyers that I know probably wouldn't take that case because the guy's not injured, thank God. Mm-hmm. But if he had a broken leg or he had a broken arm or a bruised face or black eye, then maybe some lawyer would take it. Mm-hmm. But that's not necessarily sort of a police case. Now, you know, if it was a police case and the police officers were there, police don't have to be courteous to you. They don't have to be nice to you. They're allowed to lie to you. They're allowed to investigate, right? They're allowed to do all those things to try to figure out what's going on. And while I don't love it, I understand it, because police should be allowed to investigate and do their job, of course, to keep us safe. people who are doing things the right way in the community. So if there was a police officer there and this guy's like, officer, here's my receipt, the officer would probably tell the security guard to go beat it, right? He'd be like, what are you doing, man? The guy has a receipt, leave him alone, right?
Right.
So that's what you're hoping would go. But again, you could sue the store, I guess, but that's not the kind of case we would take because there's no injury to your friend. You have to have an injury. There has to be a damage.
But isn't it against the law to illegally detain somebody and harass them?
It is. You could go to the police and file a complaint against the security guard and ask that the security guard be charged, with kidnapping or unlawful restraint or whatever it's called in that state, in that jurisdiction. And if the police choose to, they could arrest that person. In some jurisdictions, there's also avenues in criminal for citizens to file complaints against people and have a judge or DA's office involved to investigate. And again, you can sue the person for the illegal detention and collect whatever money you can get a judge or jury to give you for that. And obviously, it's totally wrong. But if you don't have a big damage, it's not going to be worth a lot of money. These cases don't pay based on rights and wrongs. You can have an officer or security guard that does something horrible to you and uses horrible words to you, but you're not hurt at all, small value. Or you can have a case where what the officer does is mildly wrong, but you have a huge damage, like you're in a coma for 10 days, and then you can get a huge payday. So the damage is what controls the outcome of the case, not necessarily the rights and wrongs. And again, there might be other civil rights lawyers that totally disagree with me, and I appreciate their views too, but this is my view and, in my opinion and perspective.
Before we wrap up, Brian, what do you think has gone wrong with the legal system? You hear a lot of lawyers now that are talking, you violated, your civil rights been violated. We hearing a lot about immigration. I mean, we're all over the map with the judicial system as a whole. You even talked about a situation in Milwaukee where a judge was arrested for withholding FBI information. Tell me about that a little bit. And then the second part of that question is, what's going wrong with our legal system? Period.
So the case with the judge in Milwaukee, I'm not 100% familiar with the depth of it, but my understanding is that they were using sort of the courthouse. ICE was using the courthouse to try to capture people to deport. And usually in the United States, in courthouses, we don't do that. We don't serve process in courthouses. We don't have our writ server go to the courthouse and serve someone with a subpoena. We don't use the court buildings for that. There's like a sort of idea that that's like a sanctuary type of place where litigants can show up and be free from that kind of thing.
Right.
And I think the judge was sort of trying to protect that, and then they arrested her for somehow interfering with whatever they were trying to do that she thought was not okay in her courtroom, I think. But I don't know the full depth of that case. And what I think is wrong with the judicial system is the same thing I told you before about Washington, D.C. when I was talking about bipartisanism and us all working together. We all just need to be nicer to each other in the community, It's okay to say good morning to someone in the elevator.
Right.
It's okay to hold the door open for someone not from your neighborhood.
Right.
And it's okay to be courteous to people. It's okay to let a car in front of you when you're driving. It's okay to give someone else the parking space, It's okay to let someone pass you on the road. It's okay in court to say good morning to the lawyer on the other side and to the judge. That's what's wrong. It's just compassion in our community and just kindness to each other in the community, right? What's wrong with that? Why is that wrong?
I'm glad that you said that because I say that every day.
Every day.
I look at people even going to like a doctor's visit and people are so tense that it's like we created a society based on fear versus, like you said, companion. People are afraid to literally say hi to you.
Right. I say good morning in my office. In the elevators, in the lobby, I run into people, strangers, everyone. I try to say good morning to everyone. Just good morning.
What makes you think you stand out versus other lawyers? And let me say this too. I really appreciate the fact that you've taken a stance, that you've gone out and you provided free information for people. I tell people, the listening audience right now, make sure you follow, you like him, you subscribe to him, because your time is money and you're taking time out of your day helping people civilly, criminally, and whatever. And you're still taking a moment out of your time to give us information, whether you use it or not. It's out there. You're taking time out of your day to do it. My hat's off to you. I thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
But what do you think? What do you think your purpose is right now? You definitely knew you wanted to be a lawyer, but when you look back now, what do you think your biggest accomplishment is in life?
Well, other than family, right? Other than your own family,
Yeah.
I think that's an accomplishment,
Mhm.
right? Your spouse, your children. But other than that, I would say, just sort of keep fighting for people, doing the best, we can. Try to take as many cases for people and help them as we can, and just keep fighting and be aggressive and, try to have the best return for them that you can do. Just do your best.
Sounds like a winner. Brian, how can the viewers reach out to you and support you, follow you, and know more about your law firm?
Zeiger Firm, ZEIGERFIRM. We're on all the social media networks. Please give us a follow, a share, a like. Thank you.
Brian, thanks so much for taking time out to come on the show. We're definitely going to have you come back and be a part of the Black Shield because you got some great information, some tips. We'll do whatever it takes on our end to support you and keep you there. Thank you once again for coming on the show. Ladies and gentlemen,
Thank you.
This has been another, and I do mean another, exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Crayton Show.